The wind howled like a wild beast across the frozen plains of the remote moon. Snow whipped sideways, covering everything in thick white layers. Dorian Reese stared out the small window of his cabin, watching the storm rage. The weather had trapped him here for weeks now. Supplies were low. Keta and hope was even lower. Dorian was a botanist sent to this distant moon to help make the land ready for human settlers. The job was lonely. There were no towns nearby, just endless ice and silence. The only sounds were the wind, the creaking of old machinery, and sometimes Dorian's own thoughts. That night, as Dorian sat by the fire reading a worn book about Earth's forests, a sudden noise stopped him. Something or someone was outside. A soft thump, then a heavier sound, like a body hitting the snow. Dorian frowned. No one was supposed to be out in this weather, not for miles. He grabbed his thick jacket and boots and opened the door just a crack. A cold rush hit his face, icy and sharp. "Hello?" called softly. There was no answer. Then he saw it, a figure slumped in the snow, just a few feet from the porch. At first, Dorian thought it was a human, but as he looked closer, his breath caught in his throat. The figure was tall and thin, but not like any human he had ever seen. Its skin was covered in dark green scales that shimmered faintly under the snow's dull light. The face was narrow and sharp, with two large eyes that looked almost reptilian. Its body was dressed in torn armor that seemed old and strange. Dorian blinked, unsure if he was dreaming or hallucinating. "Are you okay?" he asked, stepping outside despite the cold biting at his skin. The figure did not answer or move. It was alive but barely. Shivering hard, Dorian's heart pounded. Should he help? What if this was dangerous? No human or creature deserved to die alone in the freezing cold. With a deep breath, Dorian carefully reached down and wrapped his arms under the alien's shoulders. "Come on, I'll help you," he said, pulling the stranger inside. Inside the cabin, the warmth hit the alien instantly. Its eyes fluttered open, and Dorian saw pain and confusion there. The alien gasped, struggling to breathe. Dorian helped it to a chair near the fire. He tore a piece of cloth to make a bandage for the alien's bleeding arm. Double quotes. "Who ... are you?" Dorian asked gently. The alien tried to speak but only made a strange clicking sound. Dorian frowned. He didn't understand. He pulled out a small translator device from his bag, a gift from the colonists. It was old and not perfect, but it might help. He turned it on and pointed it at the alien. "Double quotes, please." "Speak," the device said in a calm voice. The alien hesitated, then whispered in broken English. "Shah. Huntress. Rack. ... lost. Shark." Dorian repeated, feeling both amazed and cautious. "What happened to you? Where did you come from?" Shark tried to explain, but her words were slow and painful. Dorian guessed she was weak from cold and hunger. Her eyes looked at him with something between fear and hope. Dorian poured some water and helped her drink. Then he offered her some food, dried fruits and nuts. Sharak ate slowly, grateful but silent. Hours passed. Outside, the storm roared on. Inside, the fire crackled. Dorian kept checking on Shark, making her comfortable with blankets and pillows. He thought about calling the authorities, but stopped. What would they do with an alien? Colony's rules were strict about contact with unknown species. They might take her away, or worse. But Dorian also knew that leaving Sharak outside meant death. The storm would not stop, and the cold would kill her for sure, so he stayed quiet. As Sharak rested, Dorian looked at her carefully. Despite her fearsome appearance, she seemed tired and vulnerable. Not a hunter or a killer, but a creature desperate to survive. Dorian's mind raced with questions. How did she get here? Was her species friendly or hostile? Could he trust her? Yet, deep inside, he felt something strong, a human instinct to protect, to help those in need. For the first time in weeks, Dorian didn't feel alone in the cold. The night passed slowly. Sharak slept fitfully. Dorian sat by the fire, keeping watch. Outside, the storm showed no sign of stopping. Inside, Two strangers shared a fragile shelter, a man from Earth and an alien from the stars, united by the same fight to live another day. Morning came slowly on the cold moon. Light was pale and weak, barely cutting through the thick clouds of snow. Inside the cabin, Dorian sat quietly, watching Shirok move with slow, careful steps. She was awake now, but very tired. She looked different in the daylight. Her scales shone faintly green, and her large eyes studied everything around her with sharp attention. Yet there was pain behind them, a deep sadness that Dorian could feel without words. "Are you feeling better?" he asked gently, handing her a cup of warm broth. Shark took it with trembling hands. She sipped carefully, then nodded once. "You," she said, her voice still soft but clearer than the night before. "You saved me." Dorian shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "You would have done the same for me, I think." Shirok's eyes flickered with something like surprise, then respect. Maybe, for a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Two strangers from different worlds. Forced to share a small cabin at the edge of a frozen wasteland, Dorian wanted to ask many questions. But first, he needed to understand more about her. "Where do you come from?" he asked. Shirok's face darkened. "Far away. My home is gone. The war took everything." Dorian's heart tightened. He knew something about war. The cost. The loss, but he had never imagined it reaching so far into space. "What kind of war?" he asked softly. "Between stars, between empires," she said. "I am a huntress, a warrior for my people. But now, I have no prey, no mission." Dorian frowned. "Huntress, what does that mean?" Shirok's eyes grew hard for a moment. "I am a hunter of enemies. I tracked and captured. I fought. For survival. But why were you alone?" Dorian asked, confused. "Where's your ship? Your team?" Shark looked away. "My ship crashed. I was the only survivor. The others ... did not live." The pain in her voice was real. Dorian felt sorry for her, but also careful. "How did you get here?" Shark's hands shook as she touched a scar on her arm. "Fell through the stars. Lost in cold. I walked until I found this place." Dorian thought of the lonely walk through the snow, the freezing air that could kill in minutes. She was stronger than she looked. "Why did you come here?" he asked. Shirok's eyes met his. "I hope to find shelter, safety." "Why not go to the colony?" Dorian asked. She shook her head. "They fear my people. They think we are dangerous." Dorian sighed. "Not everyone is dangerous. You're proof." Shirok's lips twitched into a small, almost invisible smile. The cabin was silent, except for the crackling fire. Outside, the storm still raged. There was no way out, no quick rescue. Dorian looked around. His supplies were low, not enough for two for long. "How will you survive here?" he asked. Shark's eyes sharpened. "I know how to hunt, too." "Find food." Dorian blinked. "There's nothing out there but ice and snow." Shirok smiled faintly. "I am a huntress. I find life where others see death." For the first time, Dorian felt a spark of hope. Maybe she could help him survive too. "I will help you," he said firmly. Shirok studied him carefully. "Why? You do not know me. You do not trust me." Dorian shrugged. "Maybe. But I don't want to see anyone die here," Shirok nodded. "Slowly, that is ... human." Dorian smiled a little. "I like to think so." Days passed. The storm slowed, but did not stop. Shara grew stronger with Dorian's help. She learned to eat human food, though she missed the tastes of her home. In return, she helped Dorian repair his broken machines. She had knowledge of technology far beyond what he knew. One afternoon, she surprised him by fixing a broken heat recycler, a device that kept the cabin warm during the coldest hours. "You have skills," Dorian said, watching her work. Shirok looked up. "I survive. I adapt." They spent hours talking slowly, with many misunderstandings and repeated explanations. Shirok's English was limited, and Dorian's knowledge of her culture was zero. But they tried, Sharok told. Stories of her people, of honor, of battles fought with strange weapons, of stars burned bright with the fires of war. Dorian told her about Earth's forests, its animals, and the small joys of simple life. Sometimes they laughed at the strange things they did not understand. Other times, silence grew heavy between them. One evening, Shark spoke quietly. You. Humans, ... You do not fight like us. Dorian looked surprised. What do you mean? Shark's eyes shone with sadness. You survive with kindness. With hope, with ... compassion, that is your strength. Dorian felt warmth spread through his chest. He had never thought of it like that. Maybe, he said softly, that is why we are still here. Shark looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded. They sat together by the fire, two beings from different worlds, learning to trust each other. But outside, beyond the walls of the cabin, danger was not gone. Enemies still searched for her, and soon their shadows would reach this frozen place. For now, though, there was only warmth, silence, and the fragile hope of survival. The storm outside had finally calmed. The heavy snow had slowed, two gentle flakes drifting down from a pale gray sky. Inside the cabin, the fire burned bright, casting dancing shadows on the rough wooden walls. Dorian and Shark sat opposite each other, the space between them filled with a quiet, growing understanding. Sharak was no longer the weak, trembling stranger who had collapsed outside. She moved with more strength and grace now, though her eyes still held the weight of many losses. Her scaly skin, once dull and cracked, now showed a faint, healthy glow. The heat had helped, and so had Dorian's care. For his part, Dorian felt a strange mix of relief and curiosity. The alien Huntress was more than just a mysterious visitor. She was a puzzle he wanted to solve, a companion he never expected. Your heat system is working well, Shark said, her voice steady but low. She gestured toward the repaired machine near the wall. This ... is your work? Dorian smiled. It's mostly yours. I helped a little. Sharok nodded with approval. You're kind. You use small things to survive. We rely on strength. But you use brains. Dorian finished, teasing gently. Sharak's lips twitched into a small smile. Yes. For a long moment, they sat quietly, listening to the crackle of the fire. The silence was not empty. It held the space for thoughts and feelings they could not yet share with words. Dorian stood and walked to a shelf, where a small music player sat. He turned it on and soft melodies filled the room. The music was from Earth, a simple song about rivers and trees. Sharak's eyes widened. What is this music? Dorian said. It's to help us feel better. She listened, carefully, then nodded slowly. Strange, but good. They talked more about their worlds, using simple words and gestures. Sharok described her people's home planet, a place of wide deserts and red skies. She spoke of hunting and battles, but also of beauty, of sunsets that burned bright like fire. Dorian told her about Earth's forests, its animals, and the peaceful small towns where people lived close to nature. As they shared, the walls between them grew smaller. What had started as fear and suspicion was becoming something like friendship. One evening, as the fire burned low, Shark surprised Dorian by offering to teach him how to track animals in the snow. He was hesitant. After all, he was a botanist. Not a hunter, but her confidence was convincing. They prepared for the small trip outside. Sharak dressed in warmer gear she had found in the cabin and wrapped a thick scarf around her neck. Dorian grabbed his boots and a walking stick. The air outside was sharp and cold, but the sky was clear. The storm had passed, leaving the world covered in fresh snow. Sharak moved carefully, her eyes scanning the ground. Look, she said, pointing to a set of faint tracks in the snow. Deer, small, they come here sometimes. Dorian knelt and examined the prints, amazed by the detail. He could see tiny hoof marks in the path the animal had taken. You're very good at this, he said. Shark smiled proudly. I have. They followed the tracks a short distance, careful not to disturb the quiet peace of the forest. Sharak showed him how to read the signs, broken branches, footprints, even the smell of animals in the air. Dorian listened closely, fascinated by her knowledge. For a moment, the loneliness of his life here seemed to fade away. Suddenly, Sharak stopped and held up a hand. Quiet. Dorian looked up and saw a small rabbit frozen in the bushes nearby. Blinked at them, unaware of the two strangers. Watching, Sharak nodded. Food. Dorian was hesitant. We don't have weapons. Sharak shook her head. No need. I know how. She moved slowly and carefully, showing him how to approach without frightening the animal. Lesson in patience and respect, not violence. In the end, the rabbit escaped. But the moment was important. Dorian realized that Sharak's strength was not only in hunting, it was in knowing how to live with nature. Even in harsh conditions, they returned to the cabin as the sun began to set, painting the sky with soft pink and orange light. Inside, Sharak helped Dorian prepare a simple meal. They ate together, sharing food and stories. Later, as they sat by the fire, Sharak's expression grew serious. You humans. You survive by helping others, she said quietly. That is strange. To me, Dorian nodded.
Maybe.
That's why we last so long. When one is weak, the others help. Sharak looked thoughtful. In my world, the weak are left behind. Dorian's eyes darkened. That's a hard way to live. Sharak sighed. It is. I am learning. There was a long pause before. Dorian asked, Do you want to stay here? Sharak's eyes met his. For now, this place is cold, but ... safe. Dorian smiled softly.
You're welcome.
They sat together in silence again, the warmth of the fire filling the room. Outside, stars began to shine through the clearing sky. The cold moon was quiet and still. Inside the cabin, two very different lives were slowly becoming connected. By trust, by kindness, and by the simple need to survive. The sky was a dull gray, heavy with clouds. Outside, the snow had started again, soft at first, then falling thicker and faster. Inside the small cabin, Dorian and Sharak sat near the fire, their faces lit by the warm glow. For days, they had found a fragile peace. Dorian shared what little food he had left, and Sharak helped fix broken machines and gather firewood. Together, they worked to make the cabin a safe shelter from the cold and the storm. But peace did not last long. One afternoon, as Dorian was checking a small solar panel on the roof, he noticed a strange blinking light in the distance, just beyond the tree line. It was faint, but moving closer. He frowned, feeling a sudden chill that was not from the cold air. Sharak, he called. Come here, look. Drek came inside quickly, her sharp eyes narrowing as she saw the light. That is not from your people, she said quietly. It is from them. Who? Dorian asked, heart pounding. Enemies, Sharak said, her voice low but tense. They are looking for me. Dorian's mind raced. He had suspected trouble might come, but now it was real and near. We need to prepare, Sharak said. They will not stop until they find me. Dorian nodded. What can we do? Sharak's eyes flicked around the cabin, then rested on a small pile of tools. We will trick them, she said. We can hide, make them look in the wrong place. Dorian listened as she explained. They would create fake tracks in the snow leading away from the cabin. Then, using some old signal devices, they would send a false distress signal in a different direction. It was a clever plan. But it would need careful work, and both of them working together. Outside, snow had grown heavier, and the cold wind pushed against the cabin walls. They moved quickly, setting their plan into motion. Sharak showed Dorian how to use small pieces of tech to create noises and lights in the forest. Dorian followed her lead, arranging footprints and broken branches to confuse any trackers. As they worked, their tensions slowly eased. The fear of being found mixed with the hope of survival. After hours, they finished. The snow had nearly buried their footprints, but the careful signs would be enough for a fast-moving drone or scout. Back Inside, they warmed themselves by the fire. Sharok's face was tired but calm. "Do you think it will work?" Dorian asked. Sharok smiled slightly. "It must." They waited, watching the dark forest outside. Then, faintly at first, came the hum of a drone. The sound was high and mechanical, like a bird made of metal. Dorian's heart beat fast. The drone scanned the snow, its sensors glowing bright. It followed the fake tracks, moving away from the cabin. Dorian and Sharok held their breath as it passed by, fooled by the trick. When the drone finally moved out of sight, they let out a quiet sigh of relief. "You are clever," Dorian said. Sharok shrugged. "Survival is clever." The moment felt like a victory, small but important. But then Sharok's face changed. She looked away, her eyes shadowed. "I have a sickness," she said suddenly. Dorian blinked. "What kind of sickness?" The voice was weak. "It came from the crash, a poison inside me. I hide it, ... but it grows." Dorian's worry grew. "Can I help?" Sharok shook her head slowly. "Your medicine may not work." But Dorian was not ready to give up. He'd spent years studying plants and remedies. Maybe, just maybe, he could help over the next days. Dorian searched through his small medical kit and the plants he had been growing inside the cabin. He mixed medicines and made tea, offering it to Sharok gently. She drank it without complaint, trusting him more each day. Their bond deepened as Dorian cared for her. Sharok, who once had trusted no one, now looked at him with quiet gratitude. "Why do you help me?" she asked one evening. Dorian smiled softly, because everyone deserves a chance. Sharok nodded, her eyes shining with something new. Hope. Outside, the storm began to fade. The heavy clouds lifted, revealing stars that sparkled like distant fires. Inside, a new warmth grew, not just from the fire, but from two strangers who had found friendship in the cold. The morning sun broke through the clouds for the first time in many days. Soft golden light touched the snow-covered trees, and a quiet stillness spread through the forest. Inside the cabin, Dorian stirred a pot of soup, while Sharok rested near the fire, wrapped in thick blankets. She was getting better slowly. The tea and herbal medicine seemed to help. Her breathing had steadied, and the shaking in her hands had lessened. But she still grew tired easily, and the poison from her crash injury had not fully left her body. Dorian kept trying. Each day, he checked her temperature, gave her medicine, and made sure she ate. He felt a deep sense of responsibility. She had no one else. And, though he hadn't expected it, he was starting to care for her like a close friend. "You should rest more," he said gently. Sharok looked up, her eyes calm but alert. "I rest too much. I need to move." "You're healing," Dorian replied. "Moving too fast, might I know?" she interrupted softly. "But my body, it must not forget how to move." He gave her a small nod. "All right, just slow steps." Sharok stood, leaning on the cabin wall. Her legs wobbled slightly, but she remained standing. With careful movements, she walked around the room, breathing slowly. Dorian watched quietly. He could see the strength returning to her a little more each day. It made him smile. Later that day, while Dorian was outside checking the power unit, something strange happened. A soft beeping noise came from Sharok's old wrist device, which she had hidden inside a small metal box under the floorboards. She opened it, eyes narrowing. The screen glowed faintly, showing a blinking light, green and steady. When Dorian came back inside, she looked up and showed him the screen. "What is it?" "It is a signal," she replied. "Someone is near. But it's not an enemy." Dorian's eyes widened. "A rescue." Sharok studied the screen again. "Maybe, but I do not trust quickly." Dorian nodded. "Can we answer it?" Sharok hesitated. "Yes, but they might hear us too, the others." The choice was heavy. If they answered the signal, help might come. But it could also reveal their location to those who were hunting her. Dorian looked at her with quiet determination. "You're not alone anymore. We'll figure this out." That evening they sat together at the table, drawing out a plan on a piece of old paper. If they responded to the signal, they would wait and watch from a distance, hiding near the ridge that overlooked the valley. From there, they could see who arrived. Shark showed Dorian how to use the alien device carefully, entering a reply code. When she pressed the button, a soft pulse of light blinked 3 times. Then it went quiet. Now all they could do was wait. The next morning was colder than usual. Frost covered the windows and the air felt still, almost too quiet. They packed small bags, water, food, medical supplies just in case. They left the cabin before dawn, walking through the snowy forest. Dorian followed Sharik as she led him along hidden paths. Her steps were lighter now, her breath stronger. The time spent in the cabin had made her well enough to walk farther. They reached the ridge. Just as the sun rose behind the hills, the valley below was empty, quiet white snow covering the land like a soft blanket. Sharak scanned the area with sharp eyes. Hours passed. The wind whispered through the trees. They sat together behind a large rock, sharing a small meal. Suddenly, Sharak tensed. There, she said, pointing toward the far side of the valley. A light flickered in the sky. Then, slowly, a small craft appeared, drowned, smooth, and silent. It hovered above the trees, then slowly landed near the frozen river. Dorian's mouth opened slightly. "Is that from your people?" Shark studied it. "Yes, but I do not know who pilots it." They waited, hidden, watching carefully. The door of the craft opened. A single figure stepped out, tall, thin, dressed in a dark suit with a blue symbol on the shoulder. Sharak narrowed her eyes. "Not a soldier, a messenger?" Dorian asked. "Will they help you?" "Maybe, if they are not afraid." They stayed silent as the figure walked around the landing site, holding a scanning device. It beeped softly as it moved. Then the figure paused, looked around, and touched a communicator on its wrist. A voice came through Sharak's device, low and clear. "This is Envoy Kale of the Iriath Path. We received your signal. We seek the one called Sharak. We mean no harm." Sharak's eyes softened. "I know that name. He's trusted." Dorian looked at her. "Then it's safe?" She nodded slowly. "I think so." Still, she waited a moment longer, testing the wind and listening to the silence. Then she stood and stepped out from behind the ridge. Dorian followed as they walked into the valley. The envoy turned and saw them. He raised both hands, a peaceful gesture. Sharak spoke in her native language. Dorian didn't understand the words, but the tone was calm. They exchanged short phrases, and the envoy smiled. Then Sharak turned to Dorian. "He came to find me. They thought I died in the crash." Dorian smiled in relief. "So you can go home." Sharak looked down. "Home is gone. But there is a place for me now, safe. Far from the war." Dorian's heart sank a little. He had known this moment would come, but still, it felt heavy. "Will you go?" he asked quietly. Sharak looked at the snow-covered valley, then at him. "I will decide tomorrow." Morning arrived slowly, with golden light rising over the snowy hills. The sky was clear, soft blue, and peaceful. A gentle wind whispered through the trees. The storm was gone. The danger for now had passed. Inside the cabin, Dorian stood near the window, holding a hot mug in his hands. He looked out at the frozen forest, remembering how different everything had been just a few weeks ago. Back then, he was alone, truly alone. Now, everything had changed. Behind him, Sharak sat at the small wooden table, staring at her wrist. Device, the envoy ship, still waited in the valley, quiet and patient. Dorian turned toward her. "You didn't go last night." "Didn't go last night," Sharak replied. Her voice was calm but thoughtful. "I wanted to see the stars one more time from this place." He gave her a small smile. "You'll see them from anywhere." "Yes," she agreed, then added, "but they look different when you are at peace." There was silence for a while. The fire crackled gently. A few birds chirped outside, happy to feel the sun again. Sharak stood and walked to the window beside Dorian. Her eyes followed the horizon. "I dreamed of this kind of place when I was a child," she said softly. "Quiet, no war, no hunting, just snow and light." Dorian looked at her. "You could stay. You'd be safe here." Sharak turned to him. "You have given me much, Dorian," Shelter, healing, kindness. I cannot forget that. I didn't do it for something in return. I know, she replied. That is why it matters. She walked across the room and picked up her small travel bag. It held only a few things: her broken tools, the small green plant Dorian had gifted her, and the scarf he had found for her on the first night. I do not belong to any world now, she said. But the envoy has offered me a new life. A quiet one, somewhere safe, somewhere far from the battles. Dorian nodded. You deserve that. Sharok took a deep breath. Still, it is hard to leave this place. He looked around the cabin. It wasn't much old wood, dusty shelves, and a creaky floor. But it had become something more. A home, he said. She smiled. Yes, they stepped outside together, walking slowly through the snow-covered path. The sun was higher. Now, and the air was a little warmer. The forest around them sparkled with light. At the ridge, the small alien craft waited just as before. The envoy, Kale, stood beside it, silent and respectful. Shark stopped and turned to Dorian. Will you stay here forever? Dorian shrugged. Gently, maybe. Maybe not. But for now, this is where I belong. She stepped closer to him. If I could take part of this place with me, I would. Can, he said with a grin. It's in you now. Her eyes softened. In you? You carry part of me now, too? Dorian's chest felt tight. Not from sadness, but from the weight of goodbye. He didn't want her to leave, but he knew he had to let her go. Sharok reached into her bag and pulled out a small round object. It was silver, smooth, and fit in the palm of her hand. He gave it to him. A memory stone. She said, from my world. It records voices. Dorian looked at it carefully. What does it say? She leaned in and pressed a button. Her voice played softly. To the one who gave me peace, warmth, and trust, I thank you. Your kindness saved more than my body. It saved my soul. The recording ended. Dorian swallowed, feeling his eyes sting a little. Thank you, he said, his voice quiet. Sharok stepped back and gave him one last look. Goodbye, Dorian. Be well. Then she turned and walked to the ship. The envoy bowed politely to Dorian, then followed her inside. The ship lifted off slowly, making no sound as it rose into the sky. Dorian watched it go, his hand holding the small memory stone tightly. Soon, the ship disappeared beyond the clouds. The forest was silent again. Dorian walked back to the cabin alone. The fire was still warm. Her cup still sat on the table. She was gone. He sat down and looked out the window. The wind moved gently through the trees. Snowflakes floated through the air like feathers. He didn't feel alone this time. Something had changed in him. Shark had shown him strength, survival, and friendship from a world far beyond his own. She had brought color to the gray days. And now, even though she was gone, her presence remained like a quiet echo in the walls. That night, Dorian lit the fire again and turned on the music player. The soft melody filled the cabin. He held the memory stone in his hand and smiled. Out there, somewhere in the stars, Shark was starting a new life. And here, in the snow-covered forest, Dorian had found his own kind of peace. The storm had passed, and the cold no longer felt so empty.